Hey, Diz, let's talk about the cognitive health crisis, or the mind crisis. As a reminder, there were three fundamental ideas in the mind crisis framework that I emphasized in the last video. One, the relationship between ideological groups in our society trap us in unhealthy social and emotional patterns. Two, it is critical for us to become aware of how these social emotional patterns impact our cognition, our knowledge and awareness. And three, developing knowledge and awareness about our cognition will help us mitigate against and reverse these social and emotional patterns. And remember, I offered the representation of a Hydra with many heads to help visualize the social and emotional trap that we're in right now. Here's a fourth fundamental idea in the mind crisis framework. The heads of the Hydra do not see themselves attached to the same body. The heads of the Hydra don't typically know they belong to a Hydra. To conceive of the Hydra is to look at it as one monster, but that's not what it feels like to be part of the Hydra. Instead, it feels like the other heads are separate and distinct, which is to say, it feels like my worldview is mine. It does not feel like my worldview is something that emerges from my interactions with others and from my consumption of media. And yet, here we are in the age of big data, and we know our attention has been commodified. Our attention can be bought and sold. But if our attention can be bought and sold by others, is it really behaving like our attention? And if it's so valuable in the aggregate to others, why? What is it about your attention that is valuable to somebody else? Your attention is associated with your behavior. In the aggregate, if I command enough attention, I can deliver on behaviors. Other people's attention is a hot commodity because there is a history, a reality, that it can be commanded in such a way to deliver a predictable amount of behavior. So the pervasive experience of our thoughts as our own in this world makes us vulnerable because it disguises how our minds really work. Your attention is used to change your actions by way of your thoughts and feelings, your consumption behavior, your political behavior, your health behavior, your financial behavior, etc. We can be cued or triggered to engage in behaviors in different ways, through our emotions, through social dynamics, by the structure of our environment, and propaganda can go further than habit loops. We can be groomed into taking ownership over implanted beliefs and behaviors. Our will to act can be colonized. And when we are actively, internally motivated to think and behave as our adversaries want us to, then we will behave as putty in their hands. So, the Hydra doesn't see its own body. This is like propaganda. We don't see that we're being manipulated. And this is like consciousness itself. We simply feel conscious. We feel that we are conscious and that we make decisions with our consciousness. And to the extent that our minds simulate the feeling that we have made a conscious decision for an action that was initiated before we became conscious of it, that is invisible to us. Aspects of our minds are invisible to us. This limitation has structured our consciousness. The Hydra represents what has emerged as a result of natural blind spots in our consciousness, our reluctance to accept that we're like this, vulnerable, and billionaires and 100 millionaires who, as a class, have gone mad with power and target those blind spots with state-of-the-art psyops. We can be targeted by these psychological operations along different social emotional paths to undermine our ability to perceive ourselves being manipulated. Some of us won't look at our own sense of superiority as being used against us. Some of us won't look at our commitment to a particular conspiracy theory as being used against us. Some of us won't look at our motivation to fit into a social group as being used against us. And where we don't look is exactly where a lot of propaganda operates. It doesn't have to be structured like a sophisticated intellectual argument. In fact, If the purpose of the propaganda is to get someone to act against their own interest, then the propaganda should discourage that person from carefully reasoning through it. Our legitimate suspicions open us up to developing conspiratorial thinking and paranoia, and eventually that can be used to collapse our connection to reality altogether. Our confidence and competitiveness can be fanned into arrogance and contempt, limiting our ability to work with people outside our bubble. Our motivation to fit into a social group can transform our patience and contentment into comfort seeking, complacency, minimization, and willful blindness. We live in a world where we have allowed a class of sadistic and corrupt individuals to amass fortunes grotesquely out of line with their contributions to society. These parasites want to be treated as benevolent gods, and as a class, they are using their fortunes to leverage powerful insights into human psychology, and every single advancement in technology that falls into their laps to entrench us further and further into destructive social emotional patterns so that we can never effectively organize against them, and so that they can play out all of their demented fantasies far above the law where they believe they are entitled to operate. Let's leave that here. Before delving further into Kalinsky and Dillon, I thought it would be helpful to bring up this fourth fundamental idea, that the Hydra doesn't see its own body. Another way to think of it, putting aside the Hydra metaphor, is that our consciousness has blind spots and our minds are capable of filling in the blanks. So much so that our minds can make unconscious decisions and then simulate those decisions being made consciously for the sake of our conscious sense of agency, which is very convenient for propagandists.